Noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country. These theories poison our children, who are being taught on the one hand to affirm that the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity and even their moral status, while on the other they are taught to deny the very creatureliness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the givenness of our nature as men or women. Not only is that an issue in terms of the separation of church and state or lack thereof, but is that not promoting a specific ideology, a specific religion? How is the Ten Commandments in Christianity any less sane or insane than gender ideology or critical race theory? What does any of this really have to do with an education? The idea of an education being to make citizens into individuals who can think for themselves and be productive in society. How does any of this go on here? For public institutions to use taxpayer dollars to declare the superiority or inferiority of certain races, sexes, and religions is a violation of the Constitution and civil rights law and cannot be tolerated by any government anywhere in the country. Yet at the same time, while they say this, they want to bring religion back into public schools. It literally says here, for public institutions to use taxpayer dollars to declare the superiority or inferiority of certain religions is a violation of the Constitution. So the only way around it is that if you wanted to put the Ten Commandments in every public school, you would also have to put every other religion, including Satanism, which DeSantis is now having an issue with because he wants to bring religion into the schools, and the Satanists are like, oh, but let us in too. And you don't have to worry, because even if they don't let him in, they still let Satan in by teaching Christianity, because Christianity is in its essence satanic. And if you don't believe me, go listen to some other podcasts. Go of mine, of course. Go read some of the articles by Lucian Mars that I reprinted on thelastharvest.info. But the idea is that they're being hypocrites and contradicting themselves here. They're saying that you can't promote one particular religion in schools. It's a violation of the Constitution and civil rights law. Yet they're doing it. Intend to keep doing it. It says, every threat to family stability must be confronted. You're going to have to confront a lot of things they're not talking about in this book to do that. They go on. This resolve should color each of our policies. Consider our approach to big tech. The worst of these companies prey on children like drug dealers to get them addicted to their mobile apps. Many Silicon Valley executives famously don't let their own kids have smartphones. They nevertheless make billions of dollars addicting other people's children to theirs. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms are specifically designed to create the digital dependencies that fuel mental illness and anxiety to fray children's bonds with their parents and siblings. Federal policy cannot allow this industrial-scale child abuse to continue. I don't exactly disagree with this. However, here's the problem. These same individuals who feel that social media and big tech and cell phones and mobile apps are preying on children are the same people who want to put chips in your head. The mark of the beast. Look at Elon Musk. He's behind Project 2025, and Trump, he wants to put chips in people's heads. So how can you on one hand talk about how horrible big tech is and how destructive big tech is for children, which is a valid complaint, yet you want to put chips into everyone's head? How can you make the argument that big tech is censoring everybody when you want to throw people who make pornography in prison? You're trading one form of censorship and oppression for another that's even worse. Oh, it gets better though. Finally, conservatives should gratefully celebrate the greatest pro-family win in a generation, overturning Roe versus Wade, a decision that for 5 decades made a mockery of our Constitution. So, defending the rights of women makes a mockery of our Constitution. And they point out earlier here that those who produce pornography are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. So, overturning Roe versus Wade and taking away the woman's right to have choice over what happens to her body, that's not misogynistic. These aren't my words, it's their words. They make no sense if you read this, but nobody does. If people read it, they go, what is this? What are you talking about? Pro-family win in a generation. We don't see how forcing a woman to have a child and start a family against her will is a pro-family win. How good of a mother or wife are you going to be if you don't want to be those things? It's just, oh, and here they go on. Conservatives in the states and in Washington, including in the next conservative administration, meaning the one they're going to put into play, should push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America. In particular, the next conservative president should work with Congress to enact the most robust protections for the unborn that Congress will support. And Trump says that he doesn't support a nationwide abortion ban. What do you think this is? Conservatives in the states and in Washington, including in the next conservative administration, should push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America. That would be a nationwide abortion ban. There's no other way they would be able to do that. And they say here, recognizing that many women who find themselves in immensely difficult and often tragic situations and the heroism of every choice to become a mother, alternative options to abortion, especially adoption, should receive federal and state support. So if a woman is raped or the victim of incest and pregnant, well, forcing her to have that baby is part of the greatest pro-family win in a generation, right? That's not misogynistic. Think about it. Promise number 2, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Of course, the surest way to put the federal government back to work for the American people is to reduce its size and scope back to something resembling the original constitutional intent. That may be a very good idea, but Project 2020 see that while they would like to reduce the federal government in its size and scope back to something resembling the original constitutional intent, outside of the size of the federal government, they don't wish to bring us back to something resembling the original constitutional intent. They can't, of course, they'll say we're not lying when it comes to respect to the size of the federal government. In that respect, we do wish to bring it back to something resembling the original constitutional intent. With everything else, not at all, because putting prayer in the 10 Commandments in public schools everywhere, that does not resemble the original constitutional intent, which is very clear about the concept of separation between church and state. Okay, now keep in mind that we'll get to it, but just as a little bit of a foreshadowing, one of the major goals of Project 2025 is to increase the power of the executive branch, specifically that of the president, almost to a dictatorial level. Now here they start to foreshadow a bit. They say the legislative branch, Congress, is far and away the most powerful and correspondingly the most accountable to the people. In recent decades, members of the House and Senate discovered that if they give away that power to the Article 2 branch of government, they can also deny responsibility for its actions. So then why is Congress always being lobbied? Wouldn't the unaccountable administrative state be the only target of lobbying? And in this document, at least in the beginning here, there is no mention at all about lobbying. And the problem that Congress people, when running for Congress or Senate, it takes an enormous amount of money to run. Where are you going to get the money from? Someone to whom you will then be beholden. And that's just the beginning of the corruption. So this idea that no longer set by Congress at all, it's not accurate. Again, if the legislative branch is the most powerful in their own words, yet they no longer set policy, then are they the most powerful? Again, there's contradiction after contradiction here. I'm not saying that there isn't a problem with regulatory agencies that overstep their bounds. A clear example is the ATF. But again, the ATF is mostly engaging in the actions they do because they're looking for a source of revenue. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are all taxable and an incredible source of revenue, which again goes back to why are lobbyists lobbying Congress for financial gain? Why do Congress people and senators accept the blessings of lobbyists? It's because of financial gain. This is completely ignored in this Project 2025 document. Now they go here. They say unaccountable federal spending is somehow the lifeblood of the cultural Marxist threat. I would say, especially for those who've read The Last Harvest by Lucian Mars, that unaccountable federal spending is actually the lifeblood of the plan by the elite to commit genocide on 90% of the population as laid out or engraved upon the Georgia Guidestones, and then hybridize and enslave the rest. Who do you think is paying for all these underground bases? Who's paying for all these black projects? And who's paying for all the FEMA camps? People are concerned about unaccountable federal spending being used to promote cultural Marxism, yet they're not concerned at all about the unaccountable federal spending that's building the concentration camps that they will stick both the cultural Marxists and the Christians in. So it's going to be pretty funny when you have transgenders and Christians sitting in the same FEMA camp waiting to be gassed or whatever's going to happen to them. They won't enjoy it. And for those of you who think that's not true, he's all about Christians. Well, Hitler was all about the Christians too. Who do you think was behind Hitler? It was the Christians. And as soon as Hitler was in, the Christians didn't fare so well suddenly. And you will see it just like Donald Trump turned on Mike Pence. Hang Mike Pence. What's he going to do to the rest of you Christians? He's going to stick you in the same FEMA camps with the transgenders and the gays and the pornography purveyors, and it's going to be ironic. Go on, let's be clear. The most egregious regulations promulgated by the current administration come from one place, the Oval Office. The president cannot hide behind the agencies. As many executive orders make clear, his is the responsibility for the regulations that threaten American communities, schools, and families. Okay, hold on a second. You've just spent the last several paragraphs or pages talking about how the regulations and regulatory bodies is coming from Congress, and now you're saying they're coming from one place, the Oval Office. So which one is it? Oh, and a few paragraphs ago, they're saying that Congress cannot hide behind the agencies, and now we're saying the president cannot hide behind the agencies. They say, as many executive orders make clear, his is the responsibility for the regulations that threaten American communities, schools, and families. Oh, they include the myriad of executive orders that are reprinted in The Last Harvest by Lucian Mars. Talk about taking away all your rights, all of them, literally, all your property, sticking you in concentration camps. Be talking about the same thing? What executive orders has the president made that he is denying and blaming on agencies? I think the people need to read this book. This threat is not the cultural Marxists. You may not like them. You may find wokeism aggravating and annoying, but that's not the threat. The threat is engraved upon the Georgia Guidestones. And the Georgia Guidestones aren't 922 pages like this document I'm reading. It'll take you long to read the Georgia Guidestones. Go on. It originates with appropriations from Congress. This is in reference to cultural Marxism, and is made complete by a feckless president. Okay. So now they're saying that, again, this threat of cultural Marxism, it comes from Congress. But then again, it doesn't, because they're also saying that Congress is really not responsible for anything, it's agencies. And then it's also coming from a feckless president. Okay. Oh, but a conservative president's not going to be like that. I'm sure they'll be worse. A conservative president must look to the legislative branch for decisive action. How can the president look to the legislative branch for decisive action if the legislative branch, according to their own words, is incapable of producing any decisive action? I suppose that they're saying that they wish to change things, that the legislative branch does become more decisive. That's where they're going, because they say then the administrative state is not going anywhere until Congress acts to retrieve its own power from bureaucrats and the White House. But in the meantime, here are many executive tools a courageous conservative president can use to handcuff the bureaucracy, push Congress to return to its constitutional responsibility, restore power over Washington to the American people, bring the administrative state to heel, and in the process, defang and defund the woke culture warriors who have infiltrated every last institution in America. And that's where they finally say what they're planning to do. But in the meantime, is the critical phrase here. In the meantime, there are many executive tools that a courageous conservative president, when we say courageous, it's almost like the flip side of when the woke left, the cultural Marxists refer to someone as brave. We have a courageous conservative president. So this is where Project 2025 really begins to show what they're about, which is about giving enormous power to the president and the executive branch for the sake, of course, of restoring America back to its original constitutional form, altering the balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches in order to bring things back more into alignment. This is what they're arguing. In the meantime, they'll stick you in FEMA camps. In the meantime, they'll call into play all of the executive orders laid out in the last harvest, take away all your rights, your property, do whatever they want to, put chips in your head, all in the meantime. This kind of thing where we get into now murky stuff, but it's important to look at. The one thing most necessary for governance, what it means to live well, is a very arbitrary, relativistic statement. The one thing most necessary for governance is to know what it means to live well. I don't like the sound of this. Now we talk about something here, and this goes into Trump's stupidity, where he talks about tariffs. This talks about economic engagement with China should be ended, not rethought. Our manufacturing and industrial base should be restored. Okay. How are you going to do that? You realize that almost everything is made in China. How do you plan to end that? Trump would say, well, put tariffs on all the imports from China. But the Chinese don't pay them. Those who do the importation pay them. Something that even Biden apparently doesn't grasp, because he never mentioned this during the debate in response to what Trump said. So if they put massive tariffs on imports, somehow this is going to encourage the return of the manufacturing sector to America? Okay, I don't think that's how it works. But the prices of goods, if people are complaining about inflation now, can you imagine what the price of goods would be if everything that's imported from China suddenly got a massive tariff smacked upon it? Kind of economic destruction with this bring? Yes, the manufacturing industrial base should be restored, but how? I don't see anywhere in this mandate for leadership how it would be restored. How would you do that? Economic engagement with China should be ended, not rethought. If almost all of your goods are being produced by another country, you're saying we shouldn't rethink about this economic engagement we have with China and rather just end it. Okay, where are you going to get your goods from? Oh, make them here. How are you going to bring back manufacturing? This is just absurd. All these individuals, they went to Harvard and all these academic institutions and were part of all these economic forums, and they can't figure out even the basics. Go on to promise number 4. Oh boy, here it comes. Secure our God-given individual right to enjoy, quote, the blessings of liberty, end quote. We're going to have to define what the blessings of liberty are, and I'm sure that the authors of Project 2025 will do so shortly. And okay, first of all, they start off saying the Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that all men are created equal. All men are created equal. Well, not. Some men are 5'2", others are 6'7". That's why some men can play in the NBA and others can't. One could argue that all men are created equal in the sense that they have certain rights, but that's an arbitrary, again, a belief of America's founders. Again, this is considering that many of America's founders owned slaves. I'm not quite sure how they could say that all men are created equal unless they viewed those that they kept as slaves as somehow not being men or human beings at all, which is possible. Can't ask them. They're no longer alive. And let's just look at this idea for a moment. All men are created equal, because people just gloss over this, and let's look in Wikipedia here about the quotation, all men are created equal, found in the United States Declaration of Independence. What does it exactly say in the Declaration of Independence? Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, end quote. Don't say that all men are created equal with respect to their Creator endowing them with certain unalienable rights, unless the English language, how it's interpreted, has changed over time, which it does. I'm not an expert on linguistics. But again, all men are created equal. But if you read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, you'll find that all men are not endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because if you read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, you realize that the Creator is Lucifer. He genetically engineered all the human beings on this planet. They are endowed by Lucifer with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, do you really think that Lucifer endowed people with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Human beings were engineered by Lucifer with a subconscious mind that they don't have control over, that creates a back door through which they can be influenced and possessed. Does that sound like they were endowed with rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I have books here talk about the crystal lattice work that's inside the skull, through which humans can be tracked and controlled, that enables humans to fall into some mob consciousness. Does this sound like they have liberty or the ability to pursue happiness? So all these expressions that people throw around, they're actually ridiculous. Especially ridiculous when you know that the creator of human beings, the genetic re-engineer of them, was Lucifer himself. Was working in tandem with Satan to produce slaves. You look at the discoveries of the Cassini probe and the Voyager probe, you'll see that Saturn is a giant transmitter, and the rings are artificial. They're being produced by alien spacecraft of enormous size. That Saturn is another word for Satan. Does this sound to you like your Creator endowed you with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? All men are created equal to what? Well, in the sense they're all enslaved in the Matrix? We have to dismantle these ideas, because if we don't wake up, if we don't read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, and we go on believing all this nonsense, believing in saviors, whether they be Trump or Jesus or whomever, if we go on believing these absolute lies that all men are created equal, ridiculous. How are all men created equal? Statistics these days say that most young men are single, whereas most young women are not. Are all men created equal? Let's go on. They say when the founders spoke of, quote unquote, the pursuit of happiness, what they meant might be understood today as, in essence, quote, pursuit of blessedness, end quote. Okay, what is pursuit of blessedness? What does that even mean? Pursuit of happiness is rather vague, but at least we can kind of pursuit of blessedness. And then they make a huge jump here. What they meant might be understood today as, in essence, pursuit of blessedness. Yeah, it also most probably might not be understood as that. And what is the quote unquote pursuit of blessedness? Okay, they're about to tell you. That is, individual must be free to live as his creator ordained, to flourish. Problem here is that creator of humans was Lucifer, working for Satan. So, do you think that Lucifer and Satan created you to flourish? Oh, wake up. No. So, the pursuit of blessedness is to be what? Satan's not going to bless you. He runs the matrix. There's quotes in The Last Harvest from Satan's writings himself. Let's spit upon your worship of me. Oh, yeah. So, pursuit of blessedness. Yeah, that's the problem. You see, against Satan, he hates you. If you're for him, he hates you too. You really can't win. And since him and Lucifer were responsible for your genetic re-engineering and your being stuck in this Saturnian or satanic matrix, it doesn't sound like you were created to flourish. To live inside of a prison. Yeah, that sounds like some great freedom. Go on. Our Constitution grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. What ought we to do according to the authors of Project 2025? Primarily family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. So, of course, keep making kids for the Matrix so that the vampiric extraterrestrials, headed up by Satan, can continue to feed on you as you die in war. They can implant you with chips, enslave you. Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, here we go. They put forth religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Says who? It's their opinion. Are you trying to force you? I mean, all people have this pursuit of happiness, the right to pursuit of happiness, and who are you here to tell them what the greatest source of happiness is for them? They're telling you this is what makes happiness and this is what you're going to do. It's not what you want, it's what you ought to do, and we're telling you what you ought to do. You see what the problem with electing Trump? Going through this here in their own words, because I know you're all too lazy to read it, so I'm reading it for you. I'm doing the work for you. Why not? Here. Religious devotion and spirituality. But we already know if we read The Last Harvest, or if we read the articles I've reprinted on thelastharvest.info, that all of these religions, product of Satan. So religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. So the greatest source of happiness is what? Being Satan? Continuing to make babies in his matrix and send them off to die in wars and get fed upon vampiristically, to work as a slave from birth unto death, to suffer, have your energy extracted. That's the greatest source of happiness. Yeah, these people really, they're on your side, right? No, the problem is woke cultural Marxism. The problem is not any of this other stuff. Nothing to look at here. Why do you think TikTok shut down my account as I'm starting to get millions of views every few days? Millions of views on this topic about what's really happening. They go on with the Declaration and the Constitution, meaning the Declaration of Independence. Our nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote of the Declaration as an apple of gold in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look to these documents when the elites mount their next assault on liberty. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individuals' rights to live their best life or enjoy what the framers called the blessings of liberty. This radical equality, liberty for all, not just of rights, but of authority, the rich and powerful have hated about democracy in America since 1776. This inalienable right of self-direction, of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdains. Okay, well, we all have an inalienable right of self-direction. Then who are you to tell me that the greatest source of happiness is having kids and being religious? So within paragraphs, they contradict each other. It's like an insane asylum reading this document. It makes your brain twist up. Oh, communism, socialism, Marxism, progressivism, these are oppressive rules. And so is fascism. Are somewhat opposites, yet both authoritarian, totalitarian, and oppressive. So they have fascism in there because they themselves are Christian fascists. Because the promise of all these baddies is simple. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. The problem is that it has never done so. There's no such thing as the government. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power and who, at almost every opportunity, wield it to serve themselves first and everyone else a distant second. This is not a failing of one nation or socialist party, but inherent in human nature. Well, the idea that there is no such thing as government and just people who work for the government and wield its power, that is a very true statement. And that they wield it usually to serve themselves first and foremost and everyone else a distant second. This is inherent in human nature. Certainly individuals who would wield power not to serve themselves first, but they'd never be allowed to enter into the game. You never know. I don't think you can say it's inherent in human nature. Maybe it is, but I'm sure there are going to be exceptions who aren't. And then if this is indeed true, that this is inherent in human nature, then how are they going to be every different? For those of you who've read George Orwell's Animal Farm in 1984, which I believe are banned nowadays, and for a reason, was at the end of Animal Farm that you can't tell the difference between the pigs and the men. They're all the same. It's true. If there's no such thing as government and just people who are wielding power in their own self-interest, inherent in human nature, then how are you going to be any different? Next time, we're going to go into section 1, taking the reins of government. I just wanted to go over the introduction, and it's been a very long video, but it's a very long document, 922 pages. You can see already, we've only read basically the first 52 pages. And we can see this is a highly problematic proposition, this Project 2025. And you should know this before you vote for Donald Trump, that he is completely behind what is in this document. And even if it was true that he didn't know anything about it, everyone on his staff seems to know all about it. Those who are advising him seem to know all about it. Those who will be pushing him, his controllers, know all about it. Thank you for listening to me. Again, I'm Damien Dumar, publisher of The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars. This has been another episode of the Last Harvest podcast, and I hope you enjoy it and continue to tune in. Thanks for listening.